Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Big Bros Podcast, episode 16 today. And as you can see from the title, we are discussing honesty. Honesty being the best policy, or is it the best policy? We will decide and we will talk about it. And I'm joined again by my lovely co-host and good friend, Ilan. How are you, mate?
I'm good, mate. I'm just a little bit tired. I had hockey today and got soaked in the rain. And all I want to do is just get into bed and sleep. But
sorry, mate, but you sound and look like you're a bit worse for weather.
I'm just tired. Today. I'm tired. But I hope
you've been drained.
I'm so tired. It's the Sunday scaries. But look, I'm keen to talk about why honesty is the best policy. And, I think it's a pertinent topic, as every topic we tend to discuss about is. There's no shit we're going to pick a pertinent topic, but I mean, honesty is important because it's the opposite of
lying.
Correct.
And ding.
Not being truthful, right? So when I think of honesty, I think of that exact thing, which is you have to be not just honest with yourself, but honest with those around you. You have to try and be as truthful as you can be. And some people might ask, well, why do you need to, what's actually the value in being honest?
Because there might be some merit occasionally in telling a white lie, if it saves the embarrassment of your grandmother's cooking, it might be beneficial to say a white lie here and there. So these are the things we'll dive into, whether honesty is always the way to go or whether there's a time and place for, maybe not being so honest as a sense, or just hiding the honesty rather than like lying.
So I think as a starter, I think we got to acknowledge that these sort of principles, they're not black and white in nature. You just mentioned white lies. It's a bit of a grey area, right?
Yeah.
And I think when I think of someone who's not being truthful, I'm thinking of a complete deceitful lie, right? Like, Jimmy, did you take the cookie from the cookie jar? And Jimmy says, no, Mum. And there's cookie crumbs all over his face.
Yeah.
That is probably, I don't know why I'm thinking of that, but that's probably the most pertinent example of someone who is expressing a deceitful lie. And obviously it sounds like a pretty innocent sort of thing.
I was going to say, that's a pertinent example of someone experiencing a deceitful lie. I think there's a lot worse than that, mate.
I mean, you can tell. Well, all right. If we're going to get down to the gritty,
it shows your innocence, mate. It shows your innocence.
Yeah. It's all an act.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at it in the judicial system, people will literally get less severe sentencing if they're honest, if they turn themselves in. And I think just as a society, we tend to reward honesty more.
Yeah.
I think the reason when we're younger, though, that we find being honest so challenging is some of the same reasons that kind of plague a lot of young people, which is that fear of judgment. Would you agree with that?
I 100% agree with that. And I guess it's scary because, if you have done something that's unfavorable or out of character, standing up and coming out and being forthright and saying that you have messed up in that situation when you're young is a scary thing to do. You've got, whether it's a parent in front of you or a teacher, just a bold figure in front of you, it's scary to stand up for yourself. So, we harp on about standing up for yourself in good times, and I think bad times are just as important. And being dishonest at times can really pave the way to experience standing up for yourself, because, like you said, as a youngster, it's especially difficult to do.
And I reckon, and wouldn't you agree that honesty is an elite vehicle when it comes to trying to be as truthful of a person as possible? Because I think if you look at some of the most respected people in the world, one quality that you might always observe about them is their honesty or their ability to speak truth without fear.
Unless you're looking at like an AFL coach half the time where they're just ripping out cliches after a horrible loss on the weekend. Is that honest, or is that just hiding the truth from being a shit football club at times?
Well,
I don't know. I'm just expressing my current anger towards my football club.
But, it's funny you mentioned that. It's funny you mentioned that because oftentimes, they all have very similar media training, so they tend to kind of communicate very similar things.
Yeah.
But then there'll be like a post-game interview from a coach or a player, and it's a bit off the script. And the reason it's a bit off the script is because they're telling the truth.
Yeah.
They might say, yeah, we played a really poor game. We are lacking confidence at the moment. And, you know, to a supporter or to anyone else, you first of all respect the vulnerability. But I think first and foremost, you respect the honesty.
Yeah.
Because when someone is expressing that they're honest and they're truthful, they're almost saying, like, I don't care about what blowback I'll get. It's just I value the truth more than I do telling a fib or something that isn't truthful.
And going on from that, which we can take away from sporting players and industries in general, is that you find that often when a player does speak out about something, whether it's something that's happened on field or off field, they still cop the backlash.
Well, do you remember Adam Goods with the whole the booing incidents back? I think it was in 2012, and he spoke out against the racism that he felt he was experiencing in the AFL, and a lot of people respected him for it. But as many people didn't like the fact that he went down that path. But it was interesting because as much as people may have not acknowledged who he was prior, they probably just knew he was a great gun footballer. As soon as he kind of goes out and makes a stand, I'm sure there were tons of people who disliked him a ton after what, he came out. But there would have been a lot of people that, looked at him and said, wow, that's very inspiring. Someone in your platform is calling out racism and bigotry. So you tend to, look, you're not immune from negative consequences by telling the truth.
Exactly.
But you are at the same time more likely to attract respect from others.
Yeah. I think that's the key takeaway is you can be honest. You will still cop backlash because there are still people out there that won't see you for you, and they won't see you for what you stand for or what the comments are which you're making. But maturity in the situation is not letting that dictate your pathway and your train of thought, right? Like,
I suppose so.
He's a prime example. He's a prime example because he was able to be honest about how he was feeling in a certain moment, stand up. He copped criticism, good criticism, bad criticism, but he didn't care. He was still able to express what he felt he was passionate about. And that is the ultimate form of leadership, I think. Being honest, not being afraid of the judgment from others because you're so passionate about what you believe in.
Correct. So let's bring these kind of abstract thoughts and let's pop them into a context or different environments. How does honesty and how does telling the truth manifest itself in relationships? And how important is that?
Far out, mate. Hitting us with a bang.
Why not?
Off the bat. So honesty in relationships. So that's a big one. So let's break this down. Are we talking like relationships, like
intimate relationships?
Intimate relationships, friendships, like we'll go...
I think both, because relationships are relationships and they encompass similar but different things.
Yeah, well, I think, it's, again, coming back to holding that person accountable, which we've spoken about in previous episodes. So we can sit here and say buzzwords and things like that. But I think the key takeaway of being honest in a relationship intertwines with your communication, because eventually shit will crumble. Prime example, if you've got a house of bricks that aren't stacked up nicely, those bricks are going to be coming crashing down if you're not honest and if you're not communicating what you truly feel in that relationship, right? If, communication being the bricks in that situation, they need to be stacked up pretty well for it to be a fruitful relationship, right? So I think, the communicative element is what drives the relationship, and that all entails honesty.
Well, I suppose I've been told, when I was younger and whatnot, that, trust is the foundation of your relationship. If you cannot trust your partner, no matter how much chemistry there is, no matter how compatible you are on paper, that relationship will fail. If you want to ruin your relationship, not just, with your intimate partners, but with your friends as well, start lying, because I promise you that is probably the easiest way you will ruin that relationship. And I really like that analogy that you mentioned with the whole bricks and mortar, comparing that to the true
Honesty and
honesty in
trust.
that relationship, because it's so integral, right? But yeah, I want to ask you, what are like some ways that people, because I'm sure there are a lot of people that might say like they're an honest person and they want to be honest, because I don't think there's anyone that
Wants to inherently be dishonest.
I'm genuinely convinced of that. But I think people will get themselves into situations where they end up lying.
Yeah.
And they know they're lying and they're not happy about it. And in a perfect world, they wish they weren't lying.
So why do they do it then? Why are they dishonest? Probably because it might be easy. It might be the easy option in circumstances. It might save yourself from having that hard conversation. It might save yourself from bringing impediment of your character or something you've done to the surface. It's the easy option because, yeah, it sounds so dumb. Like, you know, you just said it yourself. You'd think people wouldn't want to be inherently dishonest. Like, I don't think we're programmed to be dishonest people. We come into this world being told we know what right from wrong is, but that still doesn't mean that people follow through and act that way. And I think it comes down to what is the easy option, right? And I think even when we're thinking about single relationships, so, you know, we briefly touched on like being in a intimate relationship, but even in a single relationship, like you'll often hear...
You mean friendships?
No.
With your relationship with yourself, you mean?
No, so a single, like just being single in general. Okay. So like you're single, you're going out on the town, and we often hear words like player, some other bad words that I don't want to... Yes, some other bad words that I don't really want to say on here, but you know, being called like a player or an F-boy, things like that, often implies dishonesty, often implies deceitful character. So I think if you're someone that like is single and wants to navigate being single and experiencing different experiences with different people, it has to come from a place of honesty. What are your intentions in the situation and communicating that? People get called a player because they're probably too scared to bring those things to light and to talk about things that might be difficult, to communicate what those intentions are. And that leads them down the road of being dishonest and therefore being called what they get called.
And that's a really interesting point you made, because I think and I know that I'm digressing a little bit here. I think in our society we shame people now for wanting just to be single and have, you know, a bit of fun in a non-exclusive way. The reality is some people aren't cut out for relationships. You know, some people are genuinely not meant to be monogamous. They want to sleep around. They want to have a bit of, you know, no strings attached. I think that's fine.
But regardless,
but hold on, that brings in the point. If someone who wants that is completely honest about their intentions from the get-go, what's, you know, they shouldn't. Yeah, exactly. Well, they shouldn't not receive the same amount of respect as someone who's in a committed relationship. The reality is, it's just that whole idea of honesty and being truthful, especially with your intentions.
You have to uphold those qualities just as much as in a relationship with someone else as you do in just being single in general. You should still maintain that honesty and that level of trust and that communication. Often words that we only speak about when you're actually in a relationship with someone, I think actually not even more so when you're single, but just as much of an importance is to uphold that when you're single.
Well, I reckon it comes more to light because you're more accountable in that relationship circumstance, right?
Yeah.
It's because you've got someone who, you know, you're with more than, you know, you're not just by yourself. You have someone keeping you accountable. And that's another interesting point. I think a lot of people, and you tell me what you think, people will tend to make promises, not follow up with their promises, and they can end up lying to compensate for that, right? So, you know, I think we spoke earlier about how people might want to stay truthful, they want to be honest, but they'll get themselves into situations. I think when someone makes really ambitious promises, whether it's to their, you know, partner, to their friends, even to their boss at work, they say, I promise you I'm going to get all of this done before the timeline. I think then you run the risk. You set up an expectation, but you also run the risk
of not reaching that.
And then when they ask you, well, you promised me this. Well, I got to make up some sort of lie to, justify why I wasn't able to attain that promise.
And then you're just digging yourself a big hole. Look, I think we're sitting here saying that it is probably a mistake to make such a grand promise like that from the get-go. But if that is actually the case and you have made that grand promise from the get-go, I think the next step is, rather than trying to cover your ass by saying a lie or a white lie or hiding the truth as to why you couldn't achieve what you set out to achieve, is by being front up and saying, you know what, I thought I was able to achieve something here. I thought it was within my ability to act this certain way and get out what I strive to get out of this, but seems like I actually couldn't, and I actually just didn't meet my expectations here, and I apologize for that. And like, that is honesty, right? That is the difference. That is honesty. That is being honest within yourself, being honest about your actions here, and saying, yeah, you know what, like, I stuffed up and I'm prepared to just cop it on the chin.
And that takes I think a certain element of, just a bit of cojones, really, just being able to own up. I think another situation where you kind of understand the value of honesty is when you want to nip a problem in the bud as quickly as possible, right? Because, if you're in a situation, whether it's even at work, where someone asks you, are you proficient with a certain skill? Let's say, are you proficient with
Microsoft Excel?
Excel, right? Someone asks you in the job interview, are you proficient with Excel? And you say, yeah, I'm great. Well, at that point in time, what you're trying to do is just attain that job at the cost of the fact you might actually get exposed when you're on the job. And it's interesting because if you were to simply just acknowledge that you aren't proficient, whatever, you don't know what the outcome is. Because probably when you said, oh, fuck, if I tell them I'm not proficient at Excel,
I might not get the
I'm
job.
not going to get the job, right? So it can just nip problems in the bud. If someone asks you, if you're in a relationship and your partner asks you, are you unhappy with X, Y, and Z that I did this? And you say, nah. Well, what's going to happen? You're going to end up building resentment towards that other person because you couldn't even be honest with themselves. You're not just lying to them, you're lying to yourself.
And let's be real, if you're that close with that person, they know that you're lying straight off the bat. They know your body language. They know that you're not being truthful. So it can only last so long. It'll only boil up more, and it'll only reach a place that might turn out to be a little bit yucky.
So some listeners might hear, well, like, Ilan and Jeremy, have you never lied before? Like, you're preaching all this shit about honesty. Well, we were kids once. I'm sure, I'll be honest, I can't think of a specific time I lied, but I'm sure I did a ton of lying when I was younger. And, I think no one's perfect. Yeah, it was the easy way out, right?
We all did it as kids. But I think something now is, we try to be quite aware not to do that. We try to be quite honest.
Because the truth sets you free in a lot of ways, right? So that's interesting. And another point is, some might say, well, how honest is being honest, right? And some might say, what if I don't want to upset someone. I don't want to offend people. What if my dishonesty is coming from a place of good intentions? And that's where the whole thing about white lies come in, which is not telling the complete truth, but not completely being dishonest, if that makes sense. It's that grey area. A great example, you mentioned it off the bat, was
grandma's cooking.
Yeah, suppose you're at your grandmother's house. She's, she lives for her grandchildren, and she makes you this dish. And look, it's not the best. In fact, let's say it's crap. Like, you can't even stomach it. And she asks you, like, do you like it? At the time, you're probably running a cost-benefit analysis in your head. And you're probably thinking, well, okay, if I tell my grandmother this cooking is awful, this might just genuinely upset her.
It'll ruin her day.
It'll ruin her day. What do you do in that situation?
You'd probably tell a white lie. You'd probably say, it's good. Maybe not, it's fantastic. You don't want to sit there sounding so overt and crazy about your response, but you probably want to, just for the betterment of that person in that situation, be honest.
Well, that's the thing. It's not black and white.
Not be honest.
Well,
I said the opposite.
Yeah, well,
you would say like, the opposite, but like for the betterment of them.
And you know what? Even in those situations, you could probably still be honest, but it's the way you frame it. Instead of saying your cooking was awful, you could say, "Look, I really liked what you did there,
Yeah.
but I'm never good with this sort of like ingredient." Like,
Or you
like-
just say, "Yeah, it's good, but you know, you've done better."
no, well, seriously,
Make it into a joke. Maybe that should be, yeah. Maybe we can make white lies into jokes because we all white lie, right? We all white lie, but I think
my mum always asks something. It's funny because we're talking about cooking. Sometimes my mum will make something and she gets like, she says she doesn't care. Like she wants me to be honest.
yeah,
And I'll be honest with her. Like she'll make like a salmon fish, right?
Yeah.
And she's pretty good at it. Like I love the fish she makes, but there'll be times where it's probably not as amazing as it was the day before.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, you know what? She won't care that much if I'm honest with her. But I've learnt now that there's a way you communicate it.
Yeah,
So
of
instead of
course.
saying like, oh, it's not that good, I'll say, oh, it tastes really similar to what you did yesterday, but did you like put less, I don't know, pepper in here? I don't fucking know what she's putting in there. Did you put something like less of a certain ingredient there?
Yeah.
So it makes it sound more so that it's not that I'm not enjoying it.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to be honest and I'm trying to implicate that, sure, I may have not enjoyed it as much as I did yesterday, but the point still stands. So I suppose these are pretty kind of like innocent examples of cooking and not liking certain salmon dishes or liking them in my case. But Jeremy, I'm going to ask you, have there been cases where you've been at work or even at school where you've felt like you haven't been honest with, you know, your boss or your teachers?
Recently, I think there's an element of faking it till you make it here potentially, but also not. For my university placements, we got like a whole list of places that we could choose to have a placement at, right? And something that caught my eye was being placed in an area that I've had no experience in. And it was actually an area, it was actually dance, like a dance, area. And doing physiotherapy for dancers, okay? And in the application form, it said, like, have you had experience in this area? Like, why do you want to work in this area? Blah, blah, blah. And I was straight up. I said, I've had no experience in this area, but I used that to my advantage by kind of saying, like, whilst I have no experience in this area, in this industry, I admire a lot of what this industry has to offer, and I admire the expertise, I admire the skills, and these are things that I want to learn. So what I did in that situation was I actually used, I could have lied in that situation. I could have said, yeah, I've had experience in this area, and, therefore I would have run the risk of getting the job or the placement, whatever it is, doesn't matter. This is just an example. I would have run the risk of being accepted, getting to the workplace, to the environment, and being asked questions about it, right? And in that situation, I would have either had to keep lying, fake it till I make it, or just look like a complete bellend. So what I did was I actually was honest in that situation, answered the question by saying, I actually have no idea about this industry, but I want to use it to my advantage in the way of learning. And therefore, that actually, I reckon, opens the eyes of the employer even more. Because what do you have to lose? Like, if they like your honesty in that application, they might actually consider you, even if you don't have the experience in that industry. If you've worded it in a way that could benefit the outcome for you and the outcome for them, I reckon they would much prefer someone that comes to them with a more, from a perspective of wanting to grow, from a like an idea, they're more prone to being like active in the workplace, and they're more prone to just exploring different areas that someone might not be so used to doing. So using it to your advantage can sometimes be of benefit. So that was my experience with it.
I think it's a massive benefit. Sometimes when I speak to grandparents about certain people in our family who have passed away and some of the memories they have, the first word they always kind of say about them was that they were honest. And it just shows that even like cross-culturally, it doesn't matter where you're from, honesty is deemed such a noble quality.
And noble because it's often a quality that is hard to uphold.
Thou
because
shalt not lie. Isn't that a commandment?
It's a commandment, isn't it?
Well, it's something that's kind of stood the test of time. No matter what religion you follow, sure, the monotheistic religions subscribe to the whole Ten Commandments thing, but it's true though. It's something that's kind of stood the test of time because being deceitful has always been looked down upon.
Yeah.
And I think in your case, the whole going for that sort of application, I think the fact that you were able to acknowledge that you had, you acknowledge essentially you have a weakness.
Yeah.
You have a lack of experience. But hey, just because I've got a lack of weakness doesn't mean I'm not going to become, if you give me the time and place or the time and investment, it's not to say I'm not going to be bloody gun at it.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's giving the person the opportunity to take you for you. If they see honesty, I think you're more inclined to actually snag the role in whatever it may be. And I got accepted, and it took me by surprise, but I think it's a prime example.
Well,
that,
people love
yeah,
authenticity.
Yeah, it's authentic behavior.
And I think the people that do really well in this world are those who are authentic. Because if not for authenticity, you have fakeness, right? And, I think most of this podcast episode we've spoken really about, being honest with other people. And part of that is also being honest with yourself. And one of the ways I sometimes think about self-honesty is by keeping yourself accountable, by keeping promises to yourself. What do you reckon?
100% agree. I think that's one of the key things we bring up a lot on this podcast is keeping ourselves accountable. We like to use examples such as the gym. It's always a great example to come back to. But yeah, if I've penciled in things in my mind that I want to achieve, whether it's, work tasks, activity tasks, things with relations to my friendships, if I'm not able to uphold that, I feel so crap about myself later, and it eats me up sometimes to the point where my head hits the pillow at the end of the night and I feel crap. It normally starts off first thing in the morning. Like if I've told myself, don't scroll your phone for 15 minutes before starting the day, because I just know that that's something that will make me feel crap about myself, and then I go and do it, it's a crap start to the day. It is such a crap start to the day.
Because you lied to yourself.
Because you lied to yourself. So again, why is this such a thing that is so highly regarded in society? Because it's hard to do. It's so easy to fall into a trap where we roll with the ebbs and flows, and we get trapped in the idea of not doing what we want to do in that situation. But something you touched on in prior episodes as well is recognizing the benefit that whilst it might not benefit you in the short term, it'll benefit you in the long term. So again, that relates to self-honesty and why it's so important.
And the more honest you are with yourself, the more integrity you build up within yourself. Yeah. And there's nothing more than the world needs than people who have tons of integrity, especially in a world full of fakeness and inauthenticity. Being a authentic person with tons of integrity can be a really good shining light.
Yep, 100% agree, mate. And look, none of us are perfect. We're all going to be experiencing dishonesty with ourselves, dishonesty with others throughout our lives. But if we can recognize the moments where that occurs and we're able to rectify that by then introducing the honesty and admitting to the shame or admitting to the moments where we haven't done what we've wanted to do, then that's a tick. Because if you are honest with yourself and honest with your others 99% of the time, people know that that's your true character at the end of the day. People aren't going to see you for the few times that you may have stuffed up. They're going to see, unless it's like on a major grand scale, but if you're an honest person, you're not going to experience those major stuff ups. It should be inherently within you that, if you're an honest person, people are going to see you for that as well. So bottom line is, don't be ashamed to stuff up here and there when it comes to honesty with yourself or others. People will see your true self shine through.
And quickly before we end, I think some might, I'm not saying this would be necessarily a criticism. Some might say like what we're speaking here is kind of a little bit preachy it's almost like religious.
Mm.
And I would disagree, because I think being honest, no matter if you believe in a God, if you're religious or not, it's a universal quality, and it's so integral.
Integral and hard to uphold, which is why it should be spoken about. It should continue to be highly regarded.
Nah, completely right. Look, guys, I think we've hammered the point home quite well. Hope you guys took some value from this episode. As always, if you think this message would resonate with someone close to you, please don't hesitate in sharing this episode. If you like the episode, rate the show 5 stars, like, subscribe, follow us on all our social media platforms. And yeah, anything from you, Jeremy, before we head?
Nope. I think that you've summed it up well there, mate. So happy Tuesday, everyone, and hope you have a lovely week.
I'm going to sleep. Good night, guys. Bye.